Conference will now be recorded.
Can I share?
Yeah.
Okay. They told me to reach out and around Purim time to schedule something for Passover time.
That's around the us too.
Yeah. They want to see some months under the belt. They also want to see like the kind of like the Jewish year, right? You know, how that's gone. Yeah. Yeah. Okay. So we are dealing now, we're on page 194, and we are dealing now with let's see how he does that. Chazara. Yeah. Cooking, all the cooking issues on Shabbos. And as we said, those are the main issues. I mean, there are others, right, we've discussed, but I'd say the crux of the issues on Shabbos is we Jews take our food very seriously. And if you're going to restrict how we can prepare that food, it's going to get a little bit detail oriented as to how we do that. Okay, so let's keep in mind two things, and this is going to be our major principle. We'll also go through how it looks on a Friday night, how it looks on a Shabbos afternoon. But number one thing you can't do is to cook, bishul. Okay, that is using heat to get something to a different stage. By solid foods, we say it's kama'achal ben drusai. It's always interesting. Like the food of Ben Drusai. Who was Ben Drusai? He was a gangster who used to eat on the run. So he'd only cook his food about a third of the way cooked because he was always on the run. So Ben Drusai, right, has become part and parcel of halachic lore, right? Meaning you learn in Hilchos Shabbos, you know about Macha Ben Drusai. And I'm never sure, is it a credit to this guy, to this gangster, that somehow he's part of our halachic discussions? Or is it a forever shame on this guy that for all generations, all these two-bit criminals we've forgotten about, but Bonnie and Clyde and Ben Drusai live on, right? So whatever the case is, Machal Ben Drusai. So if something gets cooked up to a third of the way of cooking, that is a solid, right? That is cooking, okay? And if a liquid reaches the point of Yad Soledes Bo, Yad Soledes Bo is that your hand would jerk out from there. And that's about 105, 110 degrees. And you might say, I take a shower at 105. Yeah, but that's when you're expecting it, right? But if you would just happen to, see water and think that it's lukewarm and put your hand in and it's 105, what are you going to do? You're going to jerk it. It's about 105, 110 degrees. That's when a liquid is considered to be cooking. Okay?
So I actually have a question about tea. So sometimes when I get it out of the urn here, and I do the whole thing, it's still very, very hot.
Okay, we'll come to that soon. Okay? Let's just get the principles down. So a solid getting 1/3 cooked, that's a problem. That's cooking. A liquid becoming Yad Soledes Bo, that is a problem. That is cooking. Okay? Now, by a solid, we say once it's cooked, it's cooked. So if I take out my cooked chicken without all the gravy and I warm it up on Shabbos, that's not cooking because it's cooked already. Liquids, yesh bishul achar bishul. By liquids, even though it was cooked, if it's cold, if it's not the least bit warm, then you warm it up, you've cooked it again. So cold soup, there is no way to heat it up. So the first question is it cooking? If it's cooking, full stop, right? Do not go any further. If it's not cooking and you want to warm it up, so then it can't look as if you're doing an act of cooking on Shabbos. Okay? Therefore, Friday, right? You have food that's hot, cooking, right? So it doesn't look like you're doing an act of cooking on Shabbos. That's called shehiyah. Shehiyah means leaving it on the fire. So there, it can't be on an open fire. It needs to be on a covered fire. For that, we use either a crock pot or we use what's called a blech. Okay, a blech is a metal covering that goes on top of your stovetop. Then food can be left on top of that, and at times can be returned onto it. Okay, that is a cooking surface, so that does look like cooking. So I can't put something down on it because that looks like I'm cooking. However, if I left it on before Shabbos, that is fine. Okay, so very common in Shabbos homes, you'll have a blech on the stovetop, and you'll have a lot of things piled up on that blech, keeping it good and warm until the meal. Ideally, we try to have the things cooked, the food all cooked before Shabbos. If it's not cooked before Shabbos, it can be left on the blech, but you can't move it around at all because you're moving it around, right, will expedite the cooking. And that's also a problem. We don't say once it's a third cooked, then you're fine. No, any further cooking is also going to be a problem. Okay? So again, ideally, we want to have things cooked before Shabbos and then being warmed up either on a blech, right, which is something covering the fire, or electric hot plate, or on an electric hot plate, okay? And why is electric hot plate okay according to Rabbi Ze'ev and Beth Jacob standards? Why is that okay?
Because it stays in the same temperature.
It's and therefore, what you say, Lily? It's just warming it up. It's not something that you normally cook on, so it doesn't look like cooking. There are those who are stricter and say that no, a hot plate looks like cooking, and therefore you can't take cold stuff out of the fridge and put it onto a hot plate. You'd have to do something else. We'll soon see what you might have to do. You might have to cover it, right? Meaning take a 9x13 aluminum pan, turn it over, right, and place the food on top of that. What does that accomplish?
Nothing. I'm just kidding. It keeps it warm. It's not, because it's not on that.
And
surface,
therefore,
it doesn't
it doesn't look
look like
like you're cooking. Because even someone who'll say, yeah, you cook on a hot plate, yeah, but you don't cook on top of an inverted 9x13 on a hot plate, right? Okay, so let's see what he has to say over here. Okay, so we're on page 194. Okay, those, all right, so we are using this sefer. It is the Shabbos book, Illustrated Guide to Shabbos by Rabbi Ze'ev Greenwald. That's what we are using over here. Okay. 194, placing one pot above another. Although it is prohibited to put food directly on the fire, why is that? And let's say it's cooked already. Either you're cooking or it looks like you're cooking. One may put a solid food without any soup or gravy that was fully cooked before Shabbos on top of a pot which has been standing on the stove since the onset of Shabbos. Okay? Since it's on the pot, therefore, it's fully cooked. What's our concern once it's fully cooked? Maybe it looks like you're cooking. You don't cook things on top of another pot. You cook things on top of the fire or on top of the blech. Okay? I'm sorry?
Or could it become overcooked?
Okay, but that wouldn't be a problem of over. You're saying that you might be doing that. What are you saying? I'm sorry, Natalie.
If you're cooking, your food is already cooked, and then the heat is already there with the same temperature, the food's gonna burn in some point.
Okay.
It's gonna.
Okay. So therefore, are you asking that it looks like you're cooking, or are you saying that there shouldn't be a problem?
Well, food is gonna be spoiled, so why would you keep that on?
If you want to keep it good and hot, so you might put it on top of another pot.
Okay.
Okay? Now, a dry food can go on top of another pot. Why does it say solid without any soup or gravy?
Because it will change the temperature.
Because if they're super gravy, then that's because that's a liquid. And by a liquid, we say yesh bishul acher bishul. There is cooking after cooking, right? So, for example, let's say you have leftover chicken Friday night and you want to warm it up for Shabbos afternoon. Let's say you're not coming to Beth Jacob. Maybe it's raining. I don't know. Okay? So you're not going to be at Beth Jacob that Shabbos afternoon for our premier Kiddush luncheon every week, right? So you want to have that chicken. You know, I'm doing that, right? Okay. Right? So you want to be able to warm up the chicken the next day, right? So now, if you take your pan that you cook the chicken in, that has all that gravy in, you put it into the refrigerator, the gravy is going to become somewhat solidified. You put it onto your hot plate the next day or on top of another pot. It's going to turn back into a liquid. It's going to get hot. That's a problem. That's cooking. The chicken is cooked, but the gravy is going to recook because that's a liquid. So what would one do in such a case? What you would do is take an empty pan and lift out the chicken and put it into that dry pan. A little bit of gravy will come with it. That's not a problem. It has its own internal juices that when you warm it up, it's going to come out. That's not a problem. The problem is the extra juices, okay? So you don't need to suction any liquid off that chicken. Lift it up, put it into the pan. Now you've got a pan basically with just chicken in there, maybe a couple of drops that came out. Now it's put into the refrigerator. Shabbos day, take it out. You could put then either on top of a hot plate, doesn't look like cooking, or on top of, you have a fire going, cover with a blech, you put another pot. Yeah, you've got a pot over there, you put it on top of the pot, doesn't look like cooking. You don't have a pot there already, take a 9x13 pan, turn it over, put it on top of that. It doesn't look like cooking. Question?
Yeah, so is there any way to warm up soup?
There is no way to warm up soup. There is no way to warm up cold soup. What one can do, and we've done this at times, we have to be careful it doesn't spoil, is leave the soup overnight on the fire. But once the soup is cold, there is no way to warm it up. You can leave it out, let it become room temperature. It's not all that tasty with a chicken soup, but with a I don't know, how he makes a, yeah, not sweet potato. What should make? I don't know. Makes different,
Potato type of, or squash soup.
Yeah, squash is like something, yeah, but there is no way to warm that up. Friday night is the hot soup, and that's why the only way that we have hot, liquidy food Shabbos afternoon is the cholent, because the cholent goes up before Shabbos, and it stays there cooking the whole night until the next day, and that is one of my favorite foods. Yes.
I think a way, like a workaround, if you want to have, like, say we're gonna have some Shabbats that are maybe a little colder, like coming up. A workaround could be maybe is if you have if you put like a soup, if you make a big soup and you have it in a crock pot and you have it at a very low temperature.
Yeah.
Then you can maybe have it the next day.
Yeah, that's correct.
Does the liquid end up drying out?
Yeah, some of it will evaporate, but I mean that's what I'm saying.
If you
have
keep
a
it on the
lot-
low,
Yeah.
then it
Ryan
won't.
does that.
Yeah.
Yeah, crock pot. Yeah. Actually, when we have sometimes caterers and they're saying, Rabbi, I can't serve dry chicken tomorrow. I need the gravy. So I said, well, the only option that you have is take off the gravy, put it into the crock pot, okay? And then it will stay warm the whole Shabbos. And then once the chicken is out, right, you wait for the chicken to warm up a little bit and then put the chicken out, and then you could add the gravy, right? Because then I'm not cooking the liquid because it's still hot. Now, according to Sephardic, that's a lot stricter. According to Sephardic, if the liquid, if it's no longer Yad Soledet Bo, then you can't bring it back to Yad Soledet Bo, right? But according to Ashkenazi custom, as long as it's still at least a little bit warm, then it's not going to be a problem, okay, to warm it up.
Because non-Jewish people can cook kosher food in the kosher kitchen for Jewish people to eat.
Not on, well, yes and no. Okay? Food that's cooked on Shabbos, no matter who does the cooking, is a problem. You can't have a non-Jew cook on Shabbos for you. Okay? And a non-Jew cooking, so there we have to have a Jewish person involved in the process, turning on the fire, turning on the oven, and then we're good to go.
Oh, it's okay then.
Yeah.
Rabbi, what is the reason with if a non-Jew is cooking that a Jew has to turn on the oven or the fire?
Okay, so the concept of bishul akum, as it's called, which is cooked by a non-Jew, is a safeguard that there shouldn't be too much intimacy between Jews and non-Jews, leading to intermarriages.
Okay, because
In other words, food is something that that people bond over, right? We'll break bread together, right? You know, there was a guy, a very, very sweet guy, a Muslim fellow I was friendly with. He used to do those French things, French pastries at Wholesome Choice. Right? And he was so sweet. He goes, "I want to make some. Let me make one for you. Let me make one for you." I said, "No, thank you, but I said my kosher laws are a little." I said are a little extreme, so it won't work. I'll get a new pot, which is very, very sweet. But that was actually, it was very, very nice. But that creates a certain bond, and we want to be respectful, but we also want to have certain parameters.
So I have a question, what about like for same gender situation, like there's not gonna be.
Even so, it's what's called a low plug that we don't differentiate.
Wait, what was the question?
How about a woman cooking for a woman or a man for a man when it's the same gender? So it's not going to lead to that intimacy, and it's what's called a low plug where we don't start splitting hairs and like this. That.
So so they can't start the flame, but they can like cook in the kitchen together?
Correct.
Okay.
Correct.
Sounds good.
Correct.
I had volunteered once at Chabad for the preschool, and I ended up turning on the oven, I think, and some of the stuff was all like, "Oh, you can't turn it on," and I was like, "Oh, okay."
So you see, I'm not making this stuff up. Okay. I've been independently verified. Yes. Okay. So again, although to put food directly on the fire, that looks like cooking. When we put a solid food without soup or gravy, because soup or gravy is cooking after cooking, even though it's fully cooked, it still cooks again once it gets warmed up. The solid was fully cooked before Shabbos on top of a pot, which had been standing on the stove since the onset of Shabbos. Any food that contains a liquid, such as soup or gravy, may be put on top of a pot on the stove only if it will not reach the temperature of Yad Soledes, hot enough to cause the hand to recoil, even after being there for a long period. Meaning, one can't say, right, so you're asking a warming up soup. So I've got an idea. Let me put it kli al gabi kli, pot on pot, doesn't look like cooking, and I'll make sure to take it off before it reaches Yad Soledes, before it reaches that point of cooking. Fine, right? No, not fine. Once again, low plug. We're not going to differentiate. You can't put it down on a place where it could reach Yad Soledes, reach that temperature, let's say 105 degrees, even if you're planning on taking it off, because I was planning on taking it off, but then Aaron needed this, and then this happened, and the next thing I know, bubble, it's boiling over there, right? But in a place where it cannot reach Yad Soledes, right? Let's say the other pot is not directly on the flame; it's off on the side. So anything on top of it is not going to cook. It'll get warmed up, but it's not going to cook. Then I can do that because that's not cooking. So even though by a liquid there's cooking after cooking, if it's not, there's cooking after it's already been cooked. But if it cannot reach Yad Soledes, then we don't have that concern. Clear? Okay. And we spoke a little bit, a first vessel, Kli Rishon, and pouring from a first vessel. A first vessel, Kli Rishon, is a pot whose contents were heated up on the stove. It is prohibited to cook in a first vessel by putting food, liquids, spices into it. A pot is still considered a first vessel, Kli Rishon, even after it is removed from the stove, as long as it is still hot. Okay, clear? So the Kli Rishon, right, that would be the hot water urn for the water for the coffee or tea. That will be any pot that's on the fire that the food was cooked in. Kli Rishon, can't add anything into that, even when it's off off the fire. However, dry food not containing soup or gravy that was fully cooked before Shabbos may be warmed up in a first vessel that was removed from the stove. For example, let's say you've got a chicken noodle soup, okay? But you don't have the noodles in the soup already. I cooked the noodles, now I've got the noodles, dry cooked noodles. Now I take the pot off the fire. I take my soup pot off the fire. Can I add in the noodles to the soup pot then? Yes, I can. Why would you do it like that? Well, if it's cooking, the noodles are going to get really, really soft. If you want them to have a little more of a texture to them, a little more firmness, sorry?
Al dente.
Al dente. Okay, I'll take your word for it. I'm not much of a cook, right? If we want it to be al dente, right? So then what does that mean exactly?
It means like
Firm? Yeah. Okay. So then can I put the noodles into the soup pot? If the soup pot is on the fire, absolutely not. Kli Rishon, first vessel, al ha'esh, on the fire, nothing goes in there. However, fully, but off the fire, fully cooked dry food, right, can go in there. He doesn't say this, but I'll say it. Fully cooked liquid can also go into that Kli Rishon if it's off the fire, meaning if your cholent is getting a little bit too hot, so then you might want to lift up that cholent, pour directly from a Kli Rishon of water or tea kettle, right, into there and put it back down, okay? But in general, Kli Rishon, we stay away from. Okay.
I have a question. I saw a video and they were saying that you have to put like something underneath the crock pot in the crock pot.
Okay. Yes. So there are those opinions that say that the crock pot needs to have a blech of sorts. It shouldn't be directly on the fire. So there are those that say you should line the inside with aluminum foil, right? So that way that's like your blech, or make these little aluminum foil balls and put it in there so it's lifted up just a little bit. There are those that say that. Not everyone says you need to do that.
Is that like a chumrah?
I would say it's a shita. It's an opinion.
Okay.
It's a stricter opinion. Yeah.
We use that at home with the plastic thing, the best thing ever. I don't have to wash that pot.
Oh yeah, those are great. We use those here in the right. You guys know about those. Yeah, those are great. It is also prohibited to pour the contents of the first vessel onto food or liquids, as this may cook the food. Okay, so there is the Kli Rishon, the first vessel, and then there is Eroy Kli Rishon, the direct pour. Eroy is pouring from the Kli Rishon. That also, we say that the level of cooking that the Eroy can do is equal to that of the pot itself. Even though, of course, it's going to be a little bit less. It's not the pot itself, but we stringently equate the two. So if you can't put it in a Kli Rishon, then you also can't pour from a Kli Rishon directly onto that. Okay? So, again, on a Friday night, typically we're having our food cooked before Shabbos. It's staying warm. How am I keeping it warm? Either I have it warm on a hot plate, I have it warm on a blech, or, which you might have seen what we do in my house, we keep it warm in the oven that is labriut, that is off. Okay? So we'll set the timer on the oven if we're going to be eating about 8 o'clock. So now we either turn the oven off before she lights candles, or she might leave it on a timer. As long as when we're ready to take out the food, right, it's off, it doesn't look like cooking because we're taking the food out. To put the food back in, even if it's off but still very hot, would be a problem because that looks like cooking. That's how you cook in an oven. But they're taking it out. Now, if the oven is on, you can't take it out. Typically, when you open the door, the light goes on. And if you don't have a light or the light is set to not go on, when an oven is on, we discussed this before, when you open the door, immediately the oven fires up. Not like a refrigerator. You could open a refrigerator. Opening the refrigerator does not cause the compressor to automatically go on. We mentioned before, if the house is at 70, the refrigerator is supposed to be at 35, a 35-degree disparity is not going to say condenser, kick on right away and refrigerate this area. But if the oven's supposed to be at 350, so you have yourself a disparity of 200 and we say 30, right, of about 300 degrees, right? So then the oven is set to, oh boy, there's cold air rushing in here. I'm going to lose my set temperature of 350. You open the door, the fire goes on. So you can't take food out oven on Shabbos. Okay? So the ways that we keep our Friday night food hot, either on a blech, and you could also put other, like a blanket on top, something like that. But you want to do it carefully that the blanket doesn't actually hit the heating surface because that could be a fire hazard. But put a blanket something on top, it'll help contain the heat, right? Sometimes what we'll do, right, is if it's a summer night, we're going to be having soup, unless it's just the two of us. Natalie will boil it up before candlelighting. She'll turn it off, and she'll wrap that in a blanket or in a towel, right? It'll stay good and hot, and then we'll have hot soup right afterwards without keeping a fire going or a hot plate going. Or you can use a hot plate with a timer, electric timer. Have it go on, have it go off. All of those are ways that work. So that's how typically we keep our food hot for our Friday night. 196, a second vessel, kli sheni, that contains solid food. Kli sheni, if kli rishon is the food, is the pot that it was cooked in, when I then put it onto a different pot or pan or plate or bowl, that is my kli sheni. Some foods are easily cooked. For example, eggs, tea leaves. Such foods may not be added to a second vessel on Shabbos. Since we are in doubt which other foods except water fall into this category, no food should be put into a second vessel also. So we're strict when it comes to a second vessel because there are certain things that are called kalei habishul, easily cooked items. A second vessel is a container from which hot foods from a kli rishon was poured. It retains that status as long as the food remains as hot as yad soledes. Yad soledes at 105, 110, hand would jerk away. The custom is to not put bread, matzah, into a second vessel which contains food as hot as yad soledes. For instance, a bowl of hot soup. Okay? So you have your soup, and let's say it's piping hot soup, and it's yad soledes temperature. So there you would not want to add in your challah or your matzah or other things. Okay? even though the challah is already cooked, right? Well, not really. The challah is baked. Okay, so we have a rule: ein bishul acher bishul. Once something is cooked, it's not going to cook again. But if it's baked, it can cook again. So you not want to put your challah into your soup bowl if your soup bowl is a kli sheni. Now, sometimes the soup will go into a soup tureen. That's a kli sheni. And then it will go from there into your soup bowl. That's a kli shlishi. That would not be an issue. But if it's going directly from the pot into your bowl, then as long as it's yad soledet. Now, usually the soup is not 110 degrees, is it? Can be. So if you want to add stuff, you want to wait till it's not quite that hot. Now, one can argue, but Rabbi, there's a ladle. Right? So the ladle is the kli sheni, and my soup bowl is the kli shlishi, and we got clear sailing. So it's very interesting. The Mishnah Berurah at some point considers a ladle to be a kli sheni, other point it does not. And the way that that's basically viewed is as follows. If it's a cold ladle going in to that, then that will be a kli sheni. Okay? And then my soup bowl will be a kli shlishi. But if I keep using that ladle, it's going in and out, or if it's sitting in the pot, then it's already not going to be a kli sheni. What's the idea of a kli sheni?
We don't cook food.
Yes, it does include the food. But why is a kli sheni different than a kli rishon?
Is it to cool it off?
That's basically basic physics, meaning that the pot, the kli sheni, is room temperature or cold, right? So now when I put hot food in there, what's going to happen? It's going to need to they're going to need to reach homeostasis, a certain point of the heat's going to go into that bowl. The bowl's going to get hot. The soup's going to get cooler, right? So the kli sheni cools off the contents. Now it goes into a kli shlishi. It's going to get cooled off even further. Okay? Yes.
I have a question about the soup and then dipping your bread in there.
Yes.
When we had the community Shabbat, I had a bowl of soup and then I was dipping my challah in there. So is that?
So if it was yad soledes bo, then that would be a problem. Usually in the shul meals, right? By the time the soup comes out and it gets served out into the bowls and it makes it to everybody, right? It's usually not yad soledes bo, but that will depend on. So what you want to do is take a little bit of the soup and sense just how hot is it. If it's warm, if it's hottish, it's fine. If it's like smoking hot, so then you'd want to wait for that, right? Or you could pour it from that bowl into another bowl. What does that accomplish?
Cooling it down.
That's a kli shlishi. Rishon is number 1, sheni number 2, shalosh shlishi number 3. A kli shlishi doesn't cook. We'll probably see that over here. Okay. Solid foods, the fourth paragraph on 196. Solid foods like potatoes, a piece of meat, which are in a second vessel, which are as hot as yad soledes, should not have spices added to them, because some authorities consider all hot solid food as if it were in the first vessel. Why would we view this potato, this hot potato, or this hot piece of meat? Why would we view it as a kli rishon, even when it's in a kli sheni?
Nature.
Well, so a liquid spreads out, has a lot of contact points with that kli sheni, and therefore cools off, and then and is constantly moving around over there. So therefore, it's going to keep cooling off. A solid just has that one contact point. So the fact that it's in a kli sheni is not really going to cool it off. The one contact point where it's sitting might cool off, but the rest of it's going to stay as hot as it was before. So that's a reason why we'd be stricter with a solid food, right? Not to put so how about putting ketchup onto a potato?
Well, it depends on what kind of ketchup you're using.
Let's say it's Heinz.
Well, we talked
I'm
about
kidding
that.
with
We
you.
talked about
Right.
ketchup.
Okay.
You cannot put them on the top of it because ketchup itself, it's not considered
So,
solid.
okay, so that's the
It's not considered
question.
liquid.
So that's the question. Is ketchup cooked?
Yes.
Yes, it's cooked, right? Is it a liquid?
No.
It's not considered a liquid. A liquid is something that pours like a liquid, but something like ketchup, right? When I was a kid, they had the commercial for Heinz ketchup was slowest ketchup in the West. That was good, thick ketchup. But even the cheaper ketchups that are not the slowest ketchup in the West, right? It's not considered a liquid. Therefore, we would say ein bishul achar bishul, but still you're not supposed to put it into a kli rishon, right? So therefore, if it's that hot that it's still yad soledet, you wouldn't want to be putting that on. Okay?
What's the difference though? Because there's some soups that have a thicker consistency than some peppers. So what would be the difference?
Which one?
Well, no,
Shalom
like
is
a
not.
soup.
Shalom is not a liquid.
No, but
Shalom is
there's
not a liquid.
thick soups that you can
Maybe like
have.
a tomato soup.
That's
Like
true.
a potato soup or like a lentil soup, they have a bigger consistency than ketchup. So
I don't know. Not Natalie's soups. Right? And not Natalie's ketchup. I don't know.
Like
Right?
a really hearty soup, it would be.
So typically, even a really hearty soup still has a lot, as it might have a lot of chunks, but also has a lot of liquid in it, right? And when you have both, that's going to be a problem, right? It was like I said, with the chicken with the gravy, right? That's going to be a problem. The chicken's not a problem, but when you have a mixture, if there is liquid as part of that, that's going to be problematic. Okay, let's come to your tea. 197. Okay, the correct way to make tea, as described in Mishnah Berurah, is as follows. The Batei Din love asking this question, but no one does like this anymore. But they love to ask this question. Okay, so how do you make tea on Shabbos? Tea leaves are kale bishul. They cook really easily. They're non-cooked, and they cooked really easily. Therefore, the correct way they say is tea leaves or tea bags should be cooked before Shabbos to make a strong extract, the tea essence, right? So really, really, really thick tea, right? Liquid, but very strong tea, may say that. And then you add hot water into a cup, and then the tea essence is added in, okay? But, and that's the hot, that, right? And you keep the tea essence warm, right? Keep it on the corner of the blech, and you're good to go. Okay. Now, really, how do people do it? We do a kli shlishi, because even though certain things are easily cooked in a kli sheni, it's not considered halachic cooking in a kli shlishi. So coming back to your soup, Lily, if you would have poured it into another bowl, even though it might still have been non-discernibly colder, once it's in a kli shlishi, then halachically a kli shlishi is not considered to be cooking. Then you could have put in your challah with reckless abandon and not have to worry about anything. Okay? Tea in a kli shlishi. That's why, as someone mentioned, they saw how people do it, right? We have our hot water urn. There's a hot cup there. You fill it up with hot water. You then put kli sheni now. The urn is the kli rishon. The cup is the kli sheni, second vessel. Pour it into another hot cup, kli shlishi, and then you could put in your tea bags, and you don't have a problem. Yes, Natalie.
I was wondering why there's extra cup there, and I was like very upset. Like people like wasting the cup there, and I was really trying to put mine away for it. And now I understand. Oh my God,
Yes.
it's you.
Now you see.
It's you.
So,
Oh, you
Rabbi,
I'm always going up
Okay. I'm taking confession after this class. Okay. Okay. Okay.
Like a couple months ago.
Okay.
This is like today. Good.
Okay. We're gonna have to shadow you on Shabbos now. Okay.
Rabbi, I have a question about the tea.
Yes, Melissa.
Does it matter, when you put the tea bag in, it doesn't matter? You can put it in after you've poured it into the third vessel?
Yes. Okay. So good point. Remember we mentioned Eroi. Eroi is pouring. So pouring from a Kli Rishon has the same status. Pouring directly onto something from a Kli Rishon has the same status as if it was put into a Kli Rishon. Pouring something directly from a Kli Sheni has the same status as if you put it into a Kli Sheni. So therefore, with the tea, you don't want to have the tea in your third cup and pour from your second cup, if Natalie wasn't there to take it away, to pour from your second cup directly onto that tea bag, because that's like putting the tea bag into your second cup. So what you want to do is pour into the third cup and then put the tea bag in there. Okay, does that answer?
Yeah.
Does that address your issue, Melissa?
Yeah, exactly.
Okay.
Yeah.
Good.
Yeah.
Okay.
I always get it mixed up. That's why. So.
Okay.
And then you can cut the lemon, you can put the lemon in, but you cannot squeeze it, right?
Correct.
Yeah.
Correct.
I remember that because I was an exam.
Yeah. You can plop it in. Correct. Good.
And then for the hot potato, if you want to put butter or sour cream, if it is made in America, yes, you can, but if it's in Israel, you cannot because in Israel they don't pasteurize it, so you cannot use that.
Oh, interesting.
Yeah,
Interesting. Wow. Natalie, you are just a fountain over here. A fountain of wisdom. That's great. That's great. Very nice. So Natalie made an excellent point, right? So if you're putting butter onto a potato, if the butter is pasteurized, right? So then it would not be a problem of bishul after bishul, right? Of bishul after bishul. Yeah. Butter at room temperature, it stays, it doesn't turn into a liquid. Yeah. Right. But if it's non-pasteurized butter, then that's a problem of it'll be its first time cooking. So you would not want to put it onto a potato when it's yad soledes. Good. Foods that were not adequately cooked before Shabbos, 198. Care should be taken that all the food for Shabbos should be fully cooked before Shabbos. Right? That's what we said. That way you're playing it safe. In the case where food was not completely cooked, was left on the stove from before Shabbos, a number of laws must be kept that wouldn't otherwise apply. Not fully cooked, you can't put it onto the fire or onto the blech on Shabbos. But if I put it on before Shabbos, so then there'll be certain stringencies that will apply to how I deal with this food, which wouldn't apply if the food was already cooked. Because if it's not fully cooked, and you're putting on the blech before Shabbos, you have to be careful on Shabbos not to do anything that will expedite the cooking. Okay? So therefore, as long as the food is not fully cooked, no food may be taken out of the pot containing such food, as long as the food is still hot, even after the pot was removed from the stove. Okay? So if it's not completely cooked, you cannot take any food out of that pot. Why is that? What will taking the food out do? It will expedite the food that's in there will now cook faster, right? Now, I mentioned to you that my boys used to like to raid the cholent Friday night. It was already fully cooked. They would take it off, take some out, and then put it back. If it's not fully cooked, taking it off, then you can't put it back because it's not fully cooked. So you're putting it on the fire is now going to be bringing it to the cooking. One may also not stir the food on the pot. If the lid of the pot was removed, it may not be returned. Why is that? It will expedite the cooking. What would you need to do? Take it off, have it in your hands, put it on, Well, actually, no, you can't take it off either, because once you take it off, you can't put it back on.
And
Right.
it also mentioned that you cannot put towel around the area to capture the steam.
Okay,
They
so
will expedite the cooking.
okay, correct. Now, if a pot was removed from the source of heat, it may not be returned. Lastly, one may not close the door of an oven which food was placed that was not sufficiently cooked, because that's going to expedite the cooking. Okay? That's
You can't do anything with this food.
you can't do anything with this food until it cooks.
And then you can take it off.
That's why, Orly, we want it, ideally the food is cooked before Shabbos, right? If it's not cooked before Shabbos, so then it needs to be set to go and without anything on, without you doing anything.
But you can't check it, you can't, there's no point.
Correct.
Let's
So you just do it before. To avoid all
If it's fully cooked before Shabbos, you're safe, right? If not, then we have all of these concerns. So far, this is talking about shehiyah. L'shahot means to remain, to wait with. And that shehiyah is leaving things on the fire from before Shabbos into Shabbos. The next thing that we'll have to do next week is hachzara, which is returning something onto the fire, right? Rule number one, you want to put it back on the fire. Rule number one that we just said is got to be what?
No.
It's got to be fully cooked. Okay? If it's not fully cooked, forget about it.
Eat challah only.
Right? Challah, hummus, bagels, cream cheese, lox, but you can't do anything with that. Okay? Yes, that's hachzara. So number one is it needs to be fully cooked, but then we need to do certain things to make sure that it doesn't look like you are cooking. That it's clear that this is just a return to the fire and not an initial placing on the fire. And therefore, we'll see it being in your hands, or you're having intent always to put it back, right? Going on to a proper cooking surface, meaning not onto an open flame, but onto a blech or something like that, right? So we'll see all of that next week. That'll be Chazara, and that will be Hatmana.
I have a question. That's something that's totally the opposite of cooking. Can you make ice?
Okay, good question. Can you make ice on Shabbos? Okay. So making it for after Shabbos is a problem of preparing on Shabbos for after Shabbos, which we don't want to do. Okay? Is it nolad? Nolad is creating a new form, right? It might be problematic because of nolad. Okay? Yeah, I believe we wouldn't do it because of the issue of nolad. Okay? Nolad literally means like being born, being created, something new. Now, taking ice out and putting it into using ice on Shabbos, so that will not be a problem, because that's going into, even though that's also nolad, it's going from a solid to a liquid. But over there, it's not putting into a liquid, and the liquid that's coming from the ice is indiscernible, right? Is indiscernible, right? So therefore, that will not be an issue of nolad. Okay? But let's say I take the ice out and I put it into a little ice, not chest, what's it called? No, a nice little thing, has a little thing they
Oh, yeah, like a thing, a bowl.
a nice thing of all, thingamajig, right? Thing you put the ice into, people take a couple of ice cubes, right? So that's also not going to be a problem, but you wouldn't want to, anyway, you wouldn't want to, but you wouldn't want to drink that water from the bottom of that, right? Anyway, you wouldn't want to. But that would be a problem of nolad, of direct nolad, as opposed to the ice melting into the soup or into the drink. Okay.
What about breaking ice into smaller pieces.
That would not be a problem. That would not be a problem. You're doing that just because you have a big clump of ice in the freezer and you need smaller pieces to go into the drink, whatever that is?
Yeah, yeah.
Yeah. So that would not be an issue. That would not be an issue. That's not considered cutting. That would not be an issue at all. Yeah. Okay. Any other?
Actually,
Yes.
The question that Ravel asked, is it that we can't make ice on Shabbos because we're preparing it to use after?
So I think there are two problems. First of all, if you're doing for after Shabbos, in general, we don't do for Shabbos for after Shabbos. Even if I'm not, let's say I'm doing Friday night, I want to have it for Shabbos afternoon. When I walk home, it's going to be really hot. I need to have some ice when I come out, so it's for Shabbos. I still think it's a problem because of nolad, that you're creating something new. I will double check that, but I'm pretty sure we don't make ice on Shabbos because of the issue of nolad.
Yeah, because that's what I was going to ask. What if you use it the next day on Saturday?
Correct. So that would not be a problem of hachana, preparing, but I'm pretty sure it's a problem. No, I will double check that. Okay?
Thank you, Ravel.
Good.
Thank you.
All right, my friends. Everybody have a good night.
You too.
Good seeing everybody.
Bye.
Thank you.
Be well, everybody.
Ezra is being so funny right now.